Certain moments in television history transcend entertainment and become cautionary tales about character, integrity, and the inevitable consequences of deception. What transpired on the Family Feud stage in December 2024 represents one of those defining moments. Steve Harvey had presided over the show for more than a decade, witnessing countless family dynamics play out under studio lights. However, nothing in his extensive experience prepared him for what would unfold when a husband's attempt to publicly humiliate his wife backfired in the most spectacular and devastating manner imaginable. The incident serves as a profound reminder that actions rooted in cruelty and deception eventually expose themselves, often in ways the perpetrator never anticipated. On this particular afternoon, one man's arrogance and contempt for his spouse would collide with truth in a manner that left the studio audience speechless and ultimately demonstrated that justice sometimes arrives when least expected. Before examining this remarkable sequence of events that illustrates the importance of respect, honesty, and basic human decency in marriage, please take a moment to support our channel by selecting the like option and subscribing to ensure you receive these significant Family Feud moments that provide valuable lessons about integrity and the consequences of betrayal. The Holloway family from Nashville, Tennessee entered the Family Feud stage with an energy that immediately registered as unusual to experienced observers. Leading the group was Marcus Holloway, a 43-year-old financial advisor whose confident demeanor bordered on aggressive arrogance. Beside him stood his wife of 17 years, Patricia Holloway, a quiet woman whose body language suggested discomfort and resignation rather than the enthusiasm typically displayed by game show contestants. Their family team included Marcus's sister Denise, his college friend Kevin, and his business partner Robert, an unusual composition given that most families included children or extended family members rather than professional associates. Steve Harvey welcomed the Holloway family with his characteristic warmth, though his experienced eye immediately detected tension within the group that extended beyond normal nervous energy. Marcus dominated the pre-game conversation, making jokes at Patricia's expense and repeatedly suggesting that she would be the weak link on their team. The comments were delivered with a smile, framed as playful teasing, but carried an edge of genuine mockery that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Patricia stood silent throughout these exchanges, her expression carefully neutral in a way that suggested long practice at managing public humiliation. The game commenced with standard Family Feud format and energy. The Holloway family competed against the Martinez family from San Antonio, and the early rounds demonstrated that Marcus had assembled a strategically competitive team. However, what became increasingly apparent was that Marcus had structured the team specifically to exclude Patricia from meaningful participation. He consistently prevented her from answering questions, talked over her when she attempted to contribute, and made disparaging comments about her intelligence and competence in front of the studio audience and cameras. When Patricia did manage to provide an answer that appeared on the board, Marcus minimized her contribution and redirected credit to other team members. The pattern of behavior was deliberate and cruel, designed to systematically undermine and embarrass his wife on national television. During commercial breaks, Steve Harvey attempted to address the dynamic, quietly suggesting to Marcus that he might want to give Patricia more opportunities to participate and contribute to the team effort. Marcus responded with dismissive laughter, indicating that he knew his wife's limitations and was simply being strategic about utilizing team members most likely to provide correct answers. The response troubled Steve, who recognized that what was occurring on his stage extended beyond competitive gameplay into something more concerning and potentially abusive. As the game progressed and the Holloway family built a commanding lead, Marcus's behavior toward Patricia became increasingly contemptuous. What neither Marcus nor anyone else in the studio knew was that Patricia had come to this taping with knowledge that would soon transform the entire situation in ways that Marcus could never have anticipated. Understanding the full significance of what would transpire requires comprehensive knowledge of the Holloway marriage and the circumstances that had brought them to this particular moment. Marcus and Patricia had met 19 years earlier when both worked at a large financial services firm in Nashville. Marcus was an ambitious junior advisor with aspirations of building his own wealth management practice. Patricia worked in client services, helping customers navigate complex financial products and retirement planning options. Their initial attraction was based on shared professional interests and compatible social circles within the firm. The marriage that followed their 2-year courtship appeared successful from external perspectives. Marcus built a thriving financial advisory practice that generated substantial income and professional recognition. Patricia left her client services position after their marriage at Marcus's insistence, with the understanding that she would manage their household and eventually raise children. However, the children never materialized due to fertility challenges that Marcus blamed entirely on Patricia, despite medical evidence suggesting male factor infertility as the primary cause. The absence of children became one of many issues that Marcus used to diminish and criticize Patricia throughout their marriage. Over the 17 years of their marriage, Marcus's treatment of Patricia had progressively deteriorated from subtle dismissiveness to overt contempt and emotional abuse. He criticized her appearance, her intelligence, her contributions to their household, and her value as a spouse. He made disparaging comments about her in front of friends and colleagues, framing the cruelty as humor, while ensuring that Patricia understood her subordinate position in the relationship. He controlled their finances completely, providing Patricia with a modest allowance while spending freely on himself and his interests. The emotional and financial abuse created a dynamic where Patricia became increasingly isolated and dependent, unable to envision a path forward that did not include Marcus. The Family Feud appearance had been Marcus's idea, conceived as an opportunity for public entertainment at Patricia's expense. He had assembled a team specifically designed to highlight what he perceived as her inadequacies. His sister Denise disapproved of the plan, but participated out of family obligation. His friend Kevin and business partner Robert were accustomed to Marcus's treatment of Patricia and saw nothing unusual in the dynamic. Marcus had explicitly told his team members that the goal was not merely to win the game, but to create moments that would humiliate Patricia on national television, providing him with permanent recorded evidence of her supposed incompetence that he could reference indefinitely. What Marcus did not know was that Patricia had discovered his affair 3 months earlier. She had found explicit text messages and photographs on a phone that Marcus had carelessly left unlocked. The affair had been ongoing for approximately 2 years with a woman named Stephanie Chen, a client of Marcus's financial advisory practice. The relationship had progressed far beyond casual infidelity. Marcus had discussed leaving Patricia with Stephanie, had made financial arrangements that diverted marital assets, and had constructed an elaborate narrative about his marriage that portrayed Patricia as mentally unstable and emotionally abusive to justify his eventual departure. Patricia had responded to the discovery with strategic planning rather than immediate confrontation. She quietly consulted with a divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving financial abuse and hidden assets. She gathered evidence of the affair, documented Marcus's financial manipulations, and prepared for the separation that she knew was inevitable. She also made copies of all relevant financial documents, understanding that Marcus would attempt to hide assets and minimize his support obligations during divorce proceedings. The Family Feud appearance represented Patricia's decision to allow Marcus one final opportunity to demonstrate his character publicly before she initiated divorce proceedings that would expose his affair and his financial misconduct. The game continued with the Holloway family maintaining their strong performance against the Martinez family. Marcus's strategic team selection was proving effective, and they had won the main game decisively. However, Marcus's treatment of Patricia had become so pronounced that Steve Harvey made the unusual decision to address it directly on camera rather than waiting for a commercial break. During a transition between rounds, Steve approached Patricia specifically and asked her how she was feeling about the game and her family's performance. The question was a deliberate attempt to give Patricia agency and visibility that Marcus had been systematically denying her throughout the taping. Patricia looked at Steve with an expression that contained layers of emotion beneath her carefully maintained composure. She responded that she was pleased her family was winning but disappointed that she had not been given opportunities to contribute meaningfully to the effort. The statement was delivered calmly and without accusation, but it created an immediate tension on stage as it named the dynamic that everyone had observed but no one had explicitly acknowledged. Marcus attempted to laugh off the comment, suggesting that Patricia was being overly sensitive and that team strategy naturally meant utilizing members with the strongest knowledge base. Steve Harvey, however, was not satisfied with that explanation. He turned to Marcus directly and stated that part of the Family Feud experience was ensuring that all family members felt included and valued, that the game was meant to bring families together rather than create divisions or hurt feelings. He suggested that for the fast money round, Patricia should be given the opportunity to participate as one of the two players who would answer the 5 questions. The suggestion was framed as encouragement rather than criticism, but it represented a clear challenge to Marcus's control over the situation. Marcus's response revealed the depth of his contempt for his wife. He stated explicitly that putting Patricia in the fast money round would jeopardize their chance of winning the $20,000 prize because she was not knowledgeable or quick, thinking enough to perform well under pressure. He suggested that his business partner Robert would be a far better strategic choice. The statement was delivered with casual certainty, as though Patricia's inadequacy was an established fact that required no further discussion. The studio audience reacted with audible discomfort, many people recognizing the cruelty inherent in a husband publicly declaring his wife incompetent on national television. Steve Harvey's expression shifted from encouragement to something harder and more direct. He addressed Marcus with the kind of straight talk that had made him respected across his various platforms. He explained that he had been hosting Family Feud for many years and had seen thousands of families compete, and that the families who succeeded were those who supported and believed in each other. He stated that Marcus's treatment of Patricia throughout the taping had been disrespectful and inappropriate, and that regardless of strategy, a husband should want his wife to have opportunities to shine rather than actively working to diminish her. The rebuke was firm but measured, delivered with the authority of someone who had earned the right to speak directly about values and behavior. The confrontation between Steve and Marcus created a moment of unusual tension for a game show setting. Marcus appeared taken aback by the public criticism, unaccustomed to being challenged regarding his treatment of Patricia. For a moment, he seemed uncertain how to respond, his usual confidence disrupted by Steve's direct assessment. However, rather than acknowledging the validity of the criticism, Marcus defaulted to defensiveness and deflection. He suggested that Steve did not understand their marriage dynamic, that he and Patricia had a relationship where honest feedback was valued, and that Steve was misinterpreting their interactions based on incomplete information. Patricia, who had remained largely silent throughout the exchange, made a decision in that moment that would change the trajectory of everything that followed. She looked directly at Steve Harvey and stated clearly that she would very much like to participate in the fast money round if given the opportunity. The statement was simple but represented a moment of assertion that stood in stark contrast to her previous passivity. Steve immediately agreed, making the executive decision that Patricia and Marcus would be the two family members competing in fast money, overriding Marcus's strategic preferences in favor of basic fairness and respect. The fast money round began with Marcus going first while Patricia was taken backstage to prevent her from hearing the questions and answers. Marcus performed adequately, scoring 147 points across the 5 questions. His performance was solid but not exceptional, and he would need Patricia to score 53 additional points to reach the 200-point threshold required to win the $20,000 prize. As Marcus completed his round and Patricia was brought back to the stage, he made a point of expressing doubt about her ability to secure the necessary points, continuing his pattern of public undermining even at this critical juncture. Steve Harvey, visibly frustrated with Marcus's ongoing behavior, made an unusual decision to address the situation directly before beginning Patricia's portion of fast money. He turned to Marcus and stated that regardless of how Patricia performed, Marcus's treatment of his wife throughout the taping had been unacceptable and reflected poorly on his character. He suggested that a real man would build his wife up rather than tear her down, would celebrate her strengths rather than focus on perceived weaknesses, and would recognize that marriage was a partnership requiring mutual respect and support. The statement was delivered with gravity and obvious sincerity, and the studio audience responded with sustained applause in agreement. Marcus's face flushed with anger and embarrassment at being publicly called out in this manner. Rather than accepting the feedback with any semblance of grace, he responded with barely controlled hostility. He stated that Steve had no right to judge his marriage or his treatment of his wife, that their relationship dynamic was none of Steve's business, and that Steve should focus on hosting the game show rather than providing unsolicited marriage advice. The response was aggressive and inappropriate, crossing boundaries of basic respect for the host and the format. The studio audience reacted with shocked disapproval, and several of Marcus's own team members appeared uncomfortable with his escalating behavior. It was at this moment that Patricia made the decision to speak truth that she had been holding for 3 months. She turned to face Marcus directly and stated in a clear, steady voice that she would be happy to complete the fast money round, but first she needed to share something with everyone present. She explained that she had discovered Marcus's affair 3 months earlier, that he had been involved with a client named Stephanie Chen for approximately 2 years, and that she had remained silent while gathering evidence and consulting with divorce attorneys in preparation for ending their marriage. The revelation detonated in the studio like an explosive device. The audience erupted in gasps and shocked exclamations. Steve Harvey stood frozen in genuine surprise, having expected many possible developments, but not this particular disclosure. Marcus's face transformed through a sequence of expressions including shock, denial, rage, and something approaching panic as he realized that his carefully constructed deception had been exposed on national television. His sister Denise closed her eyes as though in pain, her worst fears about her brother's behavior confirmed in the most public manner possible. Patricia was not finished with her disclosure. She continued by explaining that Marcus had planned the Family Feud appearance specifically to humiliate her publicly, to create recorded evidence of her supposed inadequacy that he could use to justify leaving her for his mistress. She stated that she had allowed the situation to proceed because she wanted Marcus to demonstrate his true character on camera before she initiated divorce proceedings that would reveal his financial abuse, his affair, and his systematic efforts to undermine her throughout their marriage. She explained that every moment of his cruel treatment during the taping had been documented on video and would serve as evidence of his character during the divorce proceedings. The thoroughness of Patricia's planning and the calm delivery of her statements created a dramatic contrast with Marcus's increasingly desperate attempts at damage control. He alternated between denying the affair, minimizing its significance, and attempting to blame Patricia for driving him to seek affection elsewhere. Each attempted justification only reinforced the pattern of behavior that Patricia had described, demonstrating his inability to accept responsibility and his default tendency to blame his wife for his own choices and actions. Steve Harvey allowed the confrontation to continue for several minutes, recognizing that what was occurring transcended game show entertainment and represented something more significant about truth, accountability, and the consequences of sustained deception and cruelty. Eventually, Steve intervened to restore some structure to the situation. He acknowledged that the show had become a forum for addressing serious marital issues that extended far beyond the game format, but that Patricia deserved the opportunity to complete the fast money round if she still wished to do so. He asked Patricia directly whether she wanted to proceed with answering the 5 questions or whether she preferred to end the taping given the circumstances. Patricia's response demonstrated remarkable composure and determination. She stated that she absolutely intended to complete the fast money round, that she would answer the questions to the best of her ability, and that regardless of whether she secured the necessary 53 points, she would be leaving the studio that day with her dignity and her truth, which was worth far more than $20,000. Patricia proceeded to answer the 5 fast money questions with focused concentration while Marcus stood to the side in visible distress. Her answers were thoughtful and well-reasoned, reflecting intelligence and capability that Marcus had spent years denying and undermining. When the final scores were revealed, Patricia had scored 68 points, exceeding the required 53 and securing the $20,000 prize for the Holloway family. However, the victory was secondary to the larger narrative that had unfolded. The studio audience provided Patricia with a standing ovation that acknowledged not merely her game performance, but her courage in speaking truth and reclaiming her dignity in the face of prolonged mistreatment. The episode, when it eventually aired with careful editing to preserve the essential truth while managing the sensitive nature of the revelations, became one of the most discussed and analyzed Family Feud broadcasts in the show's history. The incident sparked extensive national conversation about emotional abuse in marriage, financial control as a form of domestic violence, and the importance of supporting individuals who find themselves in relationships characterized by sustained disrespect and manipulation. Steve Harvey addressed the situation extensively across his various media platforms, using Patricia's story as a teaching moment about recognizing abuse, supporting victims, and understanding that cruelty often masks deeper character deficiencies. Patricia filed for divorce within 3 days of the Family Feud taping. Her preparation over the previous 3 months meant that she was strategically positioned with comprehensive documentation of the affair, evidence of financial misconduct, and recorded proof of Marcus's abusive behavior from the televised game show appearance. The divorce proceedings were contentious, with Marcus attempting to minimize his financial obligations and retain control of assets that rightfully belonged to the marital estate. However, Patricia's attorney utilized the Family Feud footage effectively, demonstrating Marcus's character and his pattern of attempting to diminish and control his wife, even in public settings. The professional consequences for Marcus were substantial and immediate. Several clients who had witnessed his treatment of Patricia on television terminated their relationships with his financial advisory practice, uncomfortable with the character deficiencies he had displayed. His affair with a client violated professional ethics standards and resulted in regulatory scrutiny of his practice. Colleagues and professional associates distanced themselves from Marcus, unwilling to be associated with someone whose behavior had been so publicly revealed to be abusive and deceptive. The carefully constructed professional reputation that Marcus had built over 2 decades was severely compromised by his own choices and actions. Marcus's relationship with Stephanie Chen, the woman with whom he had conducted the affair, dissolved rapidly in the aftermath of the public exposure. Stephanie had been unaware of the full extent of Marcus's cruelty toward Patricia and was disturbed by what she witnessed on the televised episode. She recognized that the same pattern of disrespect and manipulation that Marcus had directed toward his wife would eventually be turned toward her, and she ended the relationship definitively. The realization that Marcus had destroyed his marriage and his professional reputation for an affair that immediately collapsed added another layer of consequence to his actions. 6 months following the devastating Family Feud revelation, Patricia agreed to an extensive interview with Steve Harvey on his talk show. The transformation that had occurred in her during those 6 months was remarkable. The quiet, diminished woman who had stood on the game show stage enduring public humiliation had been replaced by someone who spoke with confidence, clarity, and a sense of reclaimed power. She discussed the years of emotional abuse, financial control, and systematic undermining that had characterized her marriage to Marcus, explaining how patterns of mistreatment that begin subtly can escalate over time until victims lose sight of their own worth and capabilities. Steve asked Patricia about the decision to expose the affair on national television rather than handling it privately, whether she had concerns about the public nature of the disclosure. Patricia's response demonstrated the thoughtfulness with which she had approached the situation. She explained that Marcus had spent years diminishing her privately while maintaining a successful public image, and that she had wanted to reveal the disconnect between his public persona and his private behavior. She acknowledged that public exposure was unconventional and potentially controversial, but stated that conventional approaches had not served her well, and that sometimes dramatic action was necessary to break free from patterns of abuse and reclaim one's narrative. The interview included discussion of Patricia's plans for her future now that she was free from the marriage. She had used a portion of the $20,000 Family Feud prize to fund education and professional development, working toward re-establishing a career in financial services that would provide independence and security. She had connected with support organizations for women leaving abusive relationships and had become an advocate for recognizing emotional and financial abuse as serious forms of domestic violence. She spoke about the process of rebuilding self-esteem and confidence after years of systematic undermining, acknowledging that healing was ongoing, but that she was making substantial progress. 1 year after the Family Feud incident, Patricia had established a completely new life characterized by independence, purpose, and connection to a supportive community. The divorce had been finalized with a settlement that provided her with appropriate financial support and a fair division of marital assets. She had completed certification programs that allowed her to return to work in financial services, specifically helping other women understand their financial rights and options when leaving difficult marriages. She had become a sought-after speaker at conferences and support groups, sharing her story as an example of how individuals can reclaim power and dignity even after prolonged periods of abuse and diminishment. Marcus experienced significant ongoing consequences for his behavior. Beyond the professional and financial impacts, he lost relationships with family members and friends who had witnessed his treatment of Patricia and could no longer reconcile that behavior with continued association. His sister Denise publicly supported Patricia and maintained no contact with her brother, stating that his actions had revealed a cruelty that she found morally unacceptable. Marcus engaged in therapy at the insistence of his attorney, who recognized that demonstrating remorse and personal growth might mitigate some consequences during divorce proceedings, but his progress appeared limited and his fundamental inability to accept responsibility remained evident. 3 years following the Family Feud revelation, Patricia had become a prominent advocate for victims of emotional and financial abuse in marriage. She had authored a book titled Reclaiming Worth: Moving Beyond Emotional Abuse to Authentic Life, which provided both personal narrative and practical guidance for individuals recognizing abuse in their relationships and planning safe exits. The book became a significant resource for therapists, attorneys, and support organizations working with abuse victims. Patricia emphasized throughout her advocacy work that abuse takes many forms beyond physical violence, and that emotional manipulation, financial control, and systematic undermining of a partner's worth and capabilities represented serious violations that deserved recognition and response. Steve Harvey continued to reference the Holloway family incident for years as an example of how television could occasionally serve purposes beyond entertainment by revealing truth and providing platforms for victims to reclaim their narratives. He used the situation to educate his audiences about recognizing abuse in relationships, supporting people who were being mistreated, and understanding that public personas often masked private realities. He maintained periodic contact with Patricia, celebrating her progress and occasionally featuring her on his programs to discuss her advocacy work and the resources available for people in situations similar to what she had experienced. 5 years after that remarkable Family Feud taping, Patricia reflected on the experience in a documentary about emotional abuse and recovery. She acknowledged that the public nature of the confrontation had been traumatic in some ways, exposing private pain to millions of viewers and creating a permanent record of the most difficult period of her life. However, she also stated that the public exposure had been liberating and validating in ways that private confrontation could never have achieved. The widespread support she received from viewers who recognized similar patterns in their own relationships helped her understand that she was not alone, not uniquely flawed or inadequate, but rather someone who had survived a common form of abuse that too often remained hidden and unacknowledged. The documentary included interviews with experts in domestic violence who analyzed the Holloway case as an illustration of how emotional abuse operates and the challenges victims face in recognizing and escaping abusive dynamics. They noted that Marcus's behavior on Family Feud represented a common pattern among abusers who publicly diminish their partners to maintain control and validate their own sense of superiority. The experts praised Patricia's strategic approach to documenting abuse and preparing for separation, noting that her careful planning had protected her legally and financially in ways that impulsive responses might not have achieved. 10 years after the Family Feud incident, Patricia had built a life that bore no resemblance to the diminished existence she had endured during her marriage to Marcus. She had established a successful consulting practice helping women navigate financial aspects of divorce and rebuild economic independence following separation. She had developed meaningful relationships based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. She had reconnected with interests and capabilities that Marcus had spent years convincing her she did not possess. Most significantly, she had helped hundreds of other women recognize abuse in their own relationships and access resources necessary for safe exits and successful recovery. The story of Patricia Holloway serves as a powerful testament to the resilience of individuals who survive emotional abuse and the importance of speaking truth, even when that truth contradicts carefully maintained public narratives. It demonstrates that cruelty and deception eventually expose themselves, often in unexpected ways and at moments when perpetrators believe themselves most secure in their control. It illustrates that victims of abuse possess far more strength and capability than their abusers would have the world believe, and that reclaiming dignity and worth represents not only survival, but profound triumph over those who would diminish human value for their own purposes. If this account has provided valuable insight into the dynamics of emotional abuse, the importance of supporting those experiencing mistreatment, and the possibility of reclaiming dignity and building meaningful lives after prolonged diminishment, please take a moment to support our channel by selecting the like option and subscribing to ensure you receive additional Family Feud moments and inspiring narratives that demonstrate human resilience, the power of truth, and the eventual consequences that attend sustained cruelty and deception in relationships.